I was 7 when I first brushed against the shadow in my family's past. It was a lazy summer afternoon in Millbrook, sunlight filtering through my grandmother's lace curtains, their edges yellowed by decades, casting delicate patterns across her worn kitchen table. The air carried the warm scent of nutmeg and ginger, a fragrance that clung to her like a second skin. I sat cross-legged, engrossed in a dusty photo album I'd unearthed in the attic, its pages brittle, the black and white photographs revealing faces that echoed my own, high cheekbones, a familiar tilt of the chin. "Who's this, Grandma?" I asked, pointing to a tall, lean man standing beside my grandfather in a faded image. His dark hair was neatly combed, his arm draped casually over my grandfather's shoulder. Their smiles were warm, but the man's eyes held a secret, a glint that felt like it could pierce through time. My grandmother froze. The wooden spoon she'd been stirring her famous apple butter with slipped from her fingers, clattering against the linoleum floor. Her face drained of color, and she crossed the room in a heartbeat, her trembling hands slamming the album shut. "We don't speak of him," she whispered, her voice sharp with fear, barely audible. "Never say his name, Eleanor." She clutched the album to her chest, her eyes darting to the windows as if expecting a figure to materialize in the yard beyond. "Promise me. Promise you'll never mention him again." Her intensity shook me, and I nodded, wide-eyed, my throat tight. "I promise, Grandma." That moment was a fracture in the foundation of my childhood. My family was hiding something. Something heavy, something dark, something that made my grandmother's hands shake and her eyes search the shadows. Millbrook was a small New England town, home to just under 2,000 souls, where secrets seemed impossible. Everyone knew everyone's business, or so they thought. My family's roots ran deep, planted in 1842 when my great-great-grandfather built our home on Pine Hill Road. That Victorian house was a world of its own, with steep gables, a wraparound porch, and rooms that seemed to hum with stories. As a child, I loved its hidden corners, the cramped nook beneath the stairs, the attic brimming with forgotten treasures. But after that day in the kitchen, I began to notice the undercurrents. My mother and grandmother's cautious glances when a stranger passed through town, the nightly ritual of checking locks, their fingers lingering on the bolts as if reassuring themselves. My grandmother's habit of pausing mid-sentence, head tilted, listening to sounds I couldn't hear. "Just the house settling," she'd say, brushing it off. But I knew every creak and groan of that house like my own heartbeat. This was something else, something alive in the silence. As I grew older, the gaps in our family's history became stark. There were relatives I'd never met, names whispered in hushed tones when they thought I wasn't listening. And always there was him, the man I privately called the Shadowed One. In my young mind, he was a figure of intrigue. A fugitive, perhaps, or a disgraced uncle erased from our legacy, like a name chiseled away from an ancient monument. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the house's familiar sighs, wondering if they masked his footsteps, his presence lingering just out of sight. By 12, curiosity consumed me. I was searching my grandmother's closet for her pearl earrings for church when my fingers brushed the familiar leather cover of the photo album, hidden behind a stack of shoe boxes. My heart raced as I pulled it out, sitting cross-legged on the floor, the dim light filtering through the bedroom window. There he was, the Shadowed One. More photos than I remembered. Him leaning against a car with an unreadable license plate, the chrome glinting in the sun. Him at a family picnic, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize, her smile tentative. Him standing before our house, half his face cloaked in shadow, staring up at the windows with an intensity that made my skin prickle. My grandmother's footsteps on the stairs snapped me back. I shoved the album back into its hiding place just as she appeared in the doorway. "Find them?" she asked, her voice tight, her eyes flicking to the closet. I shook my head, unable to meet her gaze. "I think they're in the bathroom," she said, but her look lingered, as if she could sense my betrayal. That night, I heard her pacing, the floorboards groaning under her restless steps. By morning, the album was gone. High school brought distractions. Friends, crushes, dreams of college far from Millbrook's stifling embrace. But the shadowed one haunted me, a puzzle I couldn't solve. I caught snippets of my mother and grandmother's conversations, their voices low, stopping abruptly when I entered the room. Once, I overheard my grandmother on the phone, her tone taut with dread. "They've seen him again," she said. "In Hartford, Margaret's certain it was him." My mother's voice was skeptical, almost exasperated. "After all these years? It's impossible." My grandmother's reply was barely audible, yet it chilled me. "He swore he'd return for us. All of us." The words burrowed into me, a cold weight I couldn't shake. I began to piece together the silences, the glances, the locked doors. Our house, once a sanctuary, felt like a vault, guarding secrets I wasn't meant to know. At 17, I found a locked trunk in the attic, hidden beneath old quilts. The lock resisted my clumsy attempts to pick it, and I didn't dare ask my grandmother for the key. Instead, I filled notebooks with sketches of the shadowed one's face, drawn from memory, and wove stories about him. A spy, a wanderer, a man cursed by some ancient wrong. Each sketch brought me closer to him, yet farther from answers. My grandmother died the summer after I graduated college. I'd been studying literature on the West Coast, craving distance from Millbrook's weighty silences. Not because I didn't love my family, but because their secrets felt like chains. I flew back for her funeral, my heart heavy with loss. She'd been my guide, the one who'd nurtured my love of stories, who'd sat with me as I read Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre, her eyes bright with pride. She taught me to make her apple butter, to knit intricate patterns, to name the birds in our garden, robins, sparrows, the occasional hawk. Her funeral was small, just family and a few neighbors. As I stood by her grave, watching the casket lower into the earth, I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, as if someone's gaze rested on me. I scanned the mourners, my eyes catching on a tall figure by an ancient oak at the cemetery's edge. His dark hair now streaked with gray. But when I blinked, he was gone, a flicker of grief playing tricks on my mind. After the service, we gathered at the house on Pine Hill Road. The rooms felt hollow without my grandmother, the air colder despite the summer heat. Relatives milled about, their voices muted, their condolences mechanical. "Eleanor," my mother called, her face etched with sorrow and something unreadable. Fear, perhaps, or resignation. She led me to my grandmother's bedroom, untouched since her hospital stay 3 weeks earlier. The bed was made with military precision, her reading glasses resting on a worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. "Your grandmother left this for you," my mother said, pulling a small brass key from her pocket. "She wanted you to have it after she was gone." I took the key, its metal smooth from years of handling, warm from her touch. "What does it open?" I asked, turning it over in my palm. My mother's eyes flicked to the window, a gesture so like my grandmother's it tightened my throat. "She said you'd figure it out. You were always too curious, Eleanor." She paused, her voice softening, almost pleading. "Be careful. Some secrets are best left buried." She left me alone, the key heavy in my hand, its weight promising answers I wasn't sure I wanted. For 3 days, I searched the house, testing every lock I could find. The antique secretary desk in the study, the padlock on the garden shed, even the old jewelry box in my mother's room. Nothing fit. I was ready to give up, exhausted and frustrated, when a memory surfaced, the hidden cupboard beneath the stairs. As a child, I'd played there, imagining myself as a hero in a fantasy novel, waiting for magic to find me. At 9, I discovered a false panel in the cupboard's back, but it had been empty, a dusty disappointment. Now, I crawled inside, my flashlight cutting through the dimness, illuminating cobwebs and forgotten toys. The panel gave way easily, revealing a small metal box with a keyhole that matched my grandmother's key. My hands shook as I inserted it, the lock clicking open with a soft, final sound that echoed in the cramped space. Inside, I found a bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, a leather-bound journal, and a photograph I'd never seen. The photograph showed my grandmother, young and radiant, perhaps in her early 20s, standing beside the shadowed one. They were smiling, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm around her waist, their happiness frozen in time. They looked in love, a moment of unguarded joy that made my chest ache. I untied the ribbon, the letters paper fragile. The ink faded to a warm sepia. The first was dated June 12, 1954. My beloved Rebecca, it began. Every moment apart is a wound, a theft of time we could spend together. It was signed simply J. A letter, a clue, but not a full name. The letters chronicled a passionate affair, secret meetings in moonlit woods, promises of a life beyond Millbrook's confines, dreams of wandering Paris's cobblestone streets or Venice's canals. The final letter, dated October 31st, 1957, was different, its handwriting rushed, almost frantic. Rebecca, they've discovered me. They know who I am, what I've done. I must leave, but I'll return for you. No matter the years, no matter the distance. Speak my name, and I'll find you. J. The journal, in my grandmother's meticulous handwriting, spanned 1954 to 1960. Its story was so fantastical I thought it a novel at first, a flight of her imagination. But the raw emotion, the vivid details, the scent of pine in the woods, the texture of his coat under her fingers, felt too real to be fiction. It began with James Holloway, arriving in Millbrook in the spring of 1954, renting a room at the boarding house on Elm Street. He was charismatic, with an easy smile and stories of distant lands, India's markets, Egypt's ruins, that captivated the town, especially my grandmother, then 22 and working at the town library. Their romance was clandestine, stolen moments in the woods beyond Pine Hill, or at the abandoned Simmons farm on the town's edge. She wrote of his touch, the way his kisses felt like promises, his dreams of showing her the world, his strange ability to know things, warning her to avoid certain streets on certain days, only for her to later hear of accidents or crimes there. It's as if he's lived through history, she wrote. He calls it intuition, but it's more. His eyes carry centuries, a weight I can't fathom. James revealed his secret in time. He was born in 1857, frozen at 30, able to slip through time's currents like a leaf on a river. He showed her a photograph from 1887, standing before a long-demolished London building, his face unchanged, the same dark eyes staring out from the sepia print. I should think him mad, she wrote, but his memories, his knowledge are too precise. He speaks of wars and revolutions as if he walked their streets. He was searching for a way to end his condition, to age and die as mortals do, to rest after centuries of wandering. His quest led him to Millbrook, to rumors of the Caldwells, a family guarding an artifact, a medallion that could grant or revoke immortality. James befriended the Caldwells, dining at their table, charming them with stories, all while searching for the medallion. In October 1957, he stole it, a small metallic disc etched with symbols that seemed to shift when viewed too long. He showed it to my grandmother, claiming it could control his condition, perhaps even share it with her, allowing them to live forever, together unbound by time. But the Caldwells, keepers of the medallion for centuries, knew its power. They pursued him with weapons she couldn't describe, wounding him in a way that aged only the struck area, his skin turning ashen and brittle, like paper left too long in the sun. My grandmother hid him in our attic, tending to him as the aging spread, a gray patch creeping across his arm. On the third night, he recovered enough to flee, urging her to join him, to become timeless together. She refused, frightened by a new desperation in his eyes, a hunger that hadn't been there before. He made her swear never to speak his name, claiming it would summon him across time and space, a beacon he couldn't ignore. The journal's final entry, dated January 15, 1960, read, I married Thomas today. He's kind, dependable, a good man. I may grow to love him, not as I loved James, never with that fire, but enough for a quiet life, a normal life. The Caldwells keep their distance, though Mr. Caldwell's nod at church felt knowing, as if he suspects my role. I dream of James, his promises, his touch, the life we might have had. But I've chosen mortality, family, aging, death. I'll keep my vow. I'll never say his name, and I'll teach my children, their children, to do the same, because I know James will keep his promise too. If my blood speaks his name, he'll return, and heaven help us if he does. I sat in the cupboard for hours, the musty scent of old paper and cedar surrounding me like a shroud. Dozens of brittle letters and faded journal pages spilled across the floor, fragments of a story I couldn't yet piece together. The words I read clashed violently with everything I thought I knew about the world, and more disturbingly, about my own family. Immortals, time travelers, ancient artifacts. These were the subjects of fiction, not family secrets. Yet the undeniable truth stared back at me in the form of photographs. Black and white snapshots of a man named James Holloway. His face unchanged through the decades. Same intense eyes, same haunting expression. No aging, no difference. I thought perhaps it was a trick of the light or even a coincidence. But there were too many instances. 1912, 1939, 1957. James appeared in every photo without the faintest sign of time's toll. My grandmother Rebecca had scribbled on the back of one, "James again. How is this possible?" Her neat handwriting trembled slightly, fear soaking through the ink. And now, reading through her journal, I saw that fear transform into obsession. That night, my dreams betrayed me. In the dim light of the house on Pine Hill Road, I saw him, James, standing silently at the foot of my bed. The room was chilled, shadows stretching unnaturally across the floor. His dark eyes locked with mine, calm and unblinking. There was something about his presence, something both commanding and strange. It was like seeing an ancient statue suddenly come to life. "Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, familiar as a lullaby yet thick with something old and alien. "You've read her journal. You know me now." My throat seized. I couldn't respond. I couldn't move. He sat down beside me, and the mattress dipped under his weight. A scent followed him, metallic and dry, like iron mixed with dust long trapped in stone. The smell of something buried for centuries. "Don't fear me. I loved your grandmother. I'd never harm her kin. But I need your help." He unbuttoned his sleeve slowly, revealing an arm that didn't make sense. Patches of smooth, unblemished youth were fractured by skin that looked 70 years old, spotted, wrinkled, dry. A grotesque mosaic of timelines stitched together in living flesh. "The medallion was stolen from me 5 years ago," he said. "Without it, I'm aging, unnaturally, painfully." He leaned closer. "The Caldwells have it. Their protections keep me at bay. But you could retrieve it. Do this and I'll leave Millbrook forever. Your family will be safe." Then I woke, heart pounding against my ribs like a caged animal. My body was drenched in sweat, and my sheets twisted around me like vines. I glanced at the clock. 3:33 a.m., the witching hour. My grandmother used to say it was when the veil between worlds grew thinnest. But something else stopped me cold. On the floor beside my bed, on the old hardwood, were footprints, wet, bare, leading away from the bed and then vanishing into nothing. There had been no rain that night, no open windows, yet the prints glistened in the moonlight like silver phantoms, fading slowly into faint chalk outlines as dawn arrived. I didn't sleep again, couldn't. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I needed answers, and there was only one person who might give them to me, Martin Caldwell. He was the town's historian, the patriarch of the Caldwell family, and the head of Millbrook's Historical Society. If anyone knew the truth about James Holloway or Jonathan Hawthorne or whatever name he once went by, it would be him. When I entered, Martin was seated behind the reception desk. He looked exactly as I remembered him from childhood. White hair combed perfectly, glasses balanced on the tip of his nose, bow tie knotted with mathematical precision. His polite smile faltered when he saw me. "Eleanor Harrison," he said, recovering quickly. "My condolences for Rebecca. She was a fine woman." I didn't hesitate. "I need to talk about 1957. About James Holloway." His reaction was immediate. His face drained of color, eyes narrowing. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked, voice low and tense. "Her journal," I replied. She wrote about him, and the medallion, and your family. Martin glanced toward the door and windows, then pressed a small button under the desk. A soft click echoed, the front door locking behind me. Come with me, he said. This isn't a conversation for the open. We moved quickly through the museum, past glass cases displaying arrowheads, Civil War letters, and fragments of colonial pottery. He led me into a private office at the back, its walls lined with shelves. Piles of old books and yellowed documents cluttered every surface. From a locked filing cabinet, he withdrew a thick folder and set it carefully on the desk. Your grandmother kept her promise, he said, not looking at me. I always wondered if she would. He opened the folder. Inside were pages of notes, photographs, and a timeline that spanned over 3 centuries. James Holloway has had many names, many faces, but the one he showed Rebecca, that was his true face. I scanned the photos. A 1920s classroom, a 19th century steamship manifest, even an oil painting from 1783, all bearing James's unmistakable features. We've tracked him since 1692, Martin continued. Back then, he was Jonathan Hawthorne, a visitor in Salem with an unusual interest in the witch trials. My ancestor, Prudence Caldwell, took the medallion from him. He's been trying to retrieve it ever since. My breath caught. Is he immortal? Martin's face darkened. Not exactly. He's something ancient. Something that feeds not on blood like a vampire, but on human emotion. Fear, pain, grief. The medallion doesn't give him power. It binds it, keeps him tethered. Without it, he can move more freely through time, but he also begins to unravel, deteriorate. I told Martin about the dream, about James's plea. Martin didn't flinch. He's manipulating you, he said flatly. He did the same to Rebecca, told her stories of love, of loss, of longing to die. All lies. The medallion doesn't make him mortal. It stabilizes him. Without it, he loses control, but not in the way he wants you to think. He reached under his shirt and drew out a chain. At the end was the medallion. Small, metallic, engraved with symbols that shimmered unnaturally. Never the same shape for more than a second. It's safe now. He can't touch it. But he can reach you, Eleanor, through memory, through blood, through your grief. I stared at the medallion, feeling its pull like a tide in my chest. What happens if he gets it? I whispered. Martin's voice was grim. Then he's no longer bound. Not to this town, not to time. He could walk across centuries as easily as streets. And he won't just come for your family. He never stops with just one. I sat in silence. The room seemed to close in, the weight of centuries pressing against my chest. Why me? I asked at last. Why now? Martin folded the folder closed. Because you came back. Because he sees Rebecca in you. And because the medallion is calling to him again. But remember this, James Holloway is not a man. He's not even human anymore. He's hunger, wearing the face of someone your grandmother once loved. Outside, the sun had dipped below the treetops, casting long shadows across the quiet town. I stepped into the golden light, carrying the weight of truths too large for one lifetime. And I knew this was only the beginning. That night, I dreamed again. I stood in my grandmother's kitchen, but it was older. An icebox instead of a refrigerator, a wood-burning stove instead of electric, a mechanical clock ticking toward 3:33. The air carried a strange warmth, as though the room itself remembered me. James sat at the table, peeling an apple in one long, continuous spiral, the red skin curling like a ribbon onto a plate. He didn't look up. "Hello, Eleanor," he said calmly, as if we'd just seen each other yesterday. "This is a dream. A safe place to talk without the Caldwell's interference." I tried to move, but my feet wouldn't budge. My heart pounded, thudding louder than the ticking clock. I felt trapped in a moment both familiar and foreign. He set the knife down gently, as though to ease my panic, and finally met my gaze. His eyes were tired but held a strange intensity, as if he were holding back centuries of thoughts. "Martin told you I'm a monster," he said. "But the truth is more complicated. He rolled up his sleeve. His arm looked grotesque. Patches of young skin clashed against decaying flesh, a patchwork of time and age unraveling. It was like seeing a body made of mismatched lives. "I'm a traveler," he continued, "a witness to history's rise and fall. I've seen empires crumble, cities burn, humanity rebuild. I've loved and lost more than you can imagine. I've made mistakes that ripple through centuries. The Caldwells fear what they don't understand." He paused, letting that hang in the air like a challenge. "The medallion's separation is killing me. Help me and I'll leave Millbrook. Refuse, and my death will tear this town apart." He leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "Millbrook sits on a convergence point, a rift in reality where time frays. My end here at this spot would be catastrophic. Time would warp, bleed into itself. People would vanish, days would repeat, and the town would unravel. I don't want that, but it's already happening. You've seen it too, haven't you? The dreams, the flickers of places you don't recognize. That's the rift." And then he was gone. I woke up on the living room sofa, the television droning an infomercial. My teacup lay shattered on the floor, tea soaking into the carpet. My body felt stiff, like I hadn't moved in hours. But what stopped me cold was the object on the coffee table, perfectly centered. A red apple, peeled in one continuous spiral. Its white flesh gleamed, fresh and untouched. I stared, breath catching in my throat. The dream hadn't just been a dream. The next morning, the rain poured. Heavy clouds hung over Millbrook like a warning. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the night diving into books, websites, and old documents. I searched everything I could on temporal anomalies, convergence points, rifts in space-time. Most of it was theoretical physics or fringe conspiracy theories. Nothing definitive, nothing actionable. But I couldn't ignore the feeling. James's words rang in my ears like a prophecy already set in motion. I needed answers. I needed Martin. I pulled on a raincoat and walked to the Historical Society. The museum was busier than usual. School children on a field trip wandered the exhibits, and tourists browsed the gift shop. I looked around, scanning every corner. But Martin wasn't there. "He called in sick," the receptionist said when I asked. She seemed surprised, glancing at the clipboard. "First time in 3 years. He never takes days off." A chill crawled up my spine. "Do you know where he lives?" I asked. She hesitated, but I added quickly, "I'm Rebecca Harrison's granddaughter. It's important." Her expression softened. "Oh, 47 Maple Street. The big white colonial with the black shutters." I knew the house. Everyone in Millbrook did. It was one of the oldest in town, built in 1723. A pristine piece of history passed down through the Caldwell line. As I walked through the storm, my shoes soaked. I couldn't shake the unease building in my chest. When I arrived, the house was quiet, still, almost too perfect. The rain dripped from the eaves, collecting in puddles on the cobblestone path. The roses in the front garden drooped with water, their color muted by the gray sky. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. A cracked bathroom window around the side caught my eye, small, too high to reach without help. I found a wrought iron bench in the garden and dragged it beneath the window. My heart pounded. Breaking in wasn't something I'd ever done, but something felt terribly wrong. I climbed up, pushed the window open, and slipped inside. I landed on the cold tile with a thud, damp and shaking. "Martin," I called, stepping into the hallway. No response. The house was eerily quiet, every creak of the floorboards amplified. Then I heard it, a faint, rhythmic thumping sound. It was coming from below, a basement. I searched the first floor and found a door near the kitchen, locked from the outside. The key was already in the lock. I turned it slowly, cautiously. The basement stairs groaned under my weight as I descended. The smell of old wood, dust, and something sharp, metallic, hung in the air. I reached the bottom and found myself in what looked like an old workshop. Strange tools lined the walls, shelves of labeled boxes, jars filled with herbs, powders, even what looked like preserved animal parts. And then there was the door. It was heavy and carved with symbols. Symbols I recognized from the medallion. My stomach turned. I reached for the handle and pushed. It was heavy and carved with symbols. Symbols I recognized from the medallion. My stomach turned. I reached for the handle and pushed. Inside, Martin was tied to a chair, his arms and legs bound, a gag pulled tight across his mouth. His white hair was disheveled, and his eyes locked on mine the moment I entered, wide, terrified, not relieved. He shook his head violently, trying to speak through the gag. "Martin!" I rushed to him, pulling off the gag. His voice came out in a raspy breath. "Run, Eleanor," he gasped. "It's a trap. He's here." Before I could react, a hand clamped down on my shoulder and spun me around. James Holloway stood there, his face illuminated by the dim beam of my flashlight. He was calm, almost amused, but his eyes burned with something darker. "Hello, Eleanor," he said smoothly. "How kind of you to join us." His face was wrong, patches of youthful skin next to sagging, aged flesh. He looked like a man fighting the inevitable, stitched together by time's cruelty, a body in conflict with itself. "What have you done to him?" I demanded, voice trembling but defiant. "Nothing permanent," James replied. "Martin and I were discussing something that belongs to me." His eyes dropped to Martin's chest. The medallion's chain was gone. "He's been uncooperative. But with you here, I think we can finally come to an agreement." "Let him go," I said. "You said you didn't want to hurt anyone." James tilted his head. "And I don't. But sometimes, pressure is needed to push events forward." Martin groaned behind me. "Don't trust him," he hissed. "The medallion, it holds him together. Without it, he breaks apart. But if he gets it back, what happens?" I asked. "He becomes whole," Martin said. "But not human. Not anymore. He becomes what he once was, outside time, bound to nothing. That's why the Caldwells took it." James narrowed his eyes. "They feared power. They always have. They want to lock it away to keep it from being used. But power and used is decay. I've lived through centuries of watching men like them try to control history. I only want to survive and leave this place intact." I looked between them, heart racing. Two sides of a war I didn't fully understand. A man trapped by time, held together by a medallion etched with ancient symbols, and a guardian of the past who had locked that power away. "You said if you died here, it would destroy Millbrook," I said to James. "But what happens if you live?" James stepped closer, his eyes softening. "If I live, I leave. I walk away from this cursed place. I never return. But I can't leave without the medallion. And you have the means to return it." "Behind me," Martin rasped. "He's lying." I turned back to James. "Then let Martin go. Show me you mean it." James held my gaze. After a tense moment, he nodded. He reached down and cut the ropes. Martin slumped, weak but breathing. He looked at me, 1,000 words in his eyes. James extended his hand. "The choice is yours, Eleanor. Give me the medallion, or walk away and let time unravel around us." I stared at his hand, then at Martin, then at the symbols on the walls, the storm outside, the strange dreams, the peeled apple. The town was already changing. Reality was bending. Whatever choice I made would echo beyond anything I could imagine. And still, I had to choose. Let me know if you'd like to continue this as a full-length novel or convert it into a narrated YouTube script with scene directions and timing. Martin warned me not to trust James, revealing that his grandfather had once asked my grandmother to act as bait to trap James, using a weapon that would have killed her too. James admitted it, proud she'd refused, choosing a normal life but binding her family to silence. I demanded the medallion's location. Martin refused to tell. James, smiling, pulled it from his pocket, its symbols pulsing. "It must be freely given by Rebecca's blood," he said. "Take it, Eleanor. Place it around my neck, and I'll leave." I took it, feeling its unnatural weight, its presence alive in my hand. Instead of giving it to James, I pressed it to Martin's ropes. They smoked and disintegrated, freeing him. Martin smashed a vial of silvery mist at James's feet, and he screamed, collapsing in agony as we fled upstairs. We reached the front door, but James burst through, his face a mask of rage and decay. Martin shoved me toward the gate, pulling another vial. "Run to the safe house," he shouted. I fled into the rain, clutching the medallion, the streets of Millbrook deserted. Strange visions flickered, rain freezing midair, a blacksmith's forge where the pharmacy stood, a dirt track under my feet. The convergence point was unraveling. I headed for St. Michael's Church, its stone walls and heavy doors a temporary refuge. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and incense, unchanged since my childhood. I sank onto a pew, the medallion glowing softly. "What are you?" I whispered. It warmed, its symbols pulsing with golden light, flooding my mind with images. James finding it in a cave in 1587, his wonder turning to arrogance. The Caldwell's centuries-long vigil. My grandmother's love and her choice to protect us. The medallion showed me futures. James restored, unpredictable. James dying, Millbrook torn apart by rifts, or a third path, a new bond, a partnership. The church door burst open. James stood there, rain-soaked, deteriorating. Martin limped behind, wounded but relentless. "Give me the medallion," James pleaded. "No one else needs to hurt." Martin called him a liar, a killer. I stood, the medallion's glow intensifying. "It's alive," I said. "It wants partnership, not control." Before they could stop me, I placed it around my neck. Golden light enveloped me, my perception expanding. St. Michael's in 1723, 1847, 1906, all layered in my vision. The medallion merged with me, sharing its will. I touched James, severing his bond, making him mortal, his body healing to his true age of 34. "You're free," I told him. "Live normally." I healed Martin's wound, the light knitting his flesh. "Your vigil is over," I said. "I'm a new traveler, here to heal rifts." The golden light flared, and I was no longer in the church. The medallion and I were one, a partnership forged in that moment of choice. I stood in a forest, the air crisp with the scent of pine and earth, the sky a deep indigo streaked with stars. The medallion pulsed against my chest, guiding me, its presence a gentle hum in my mind. I was no longer bound by Millbrook's time, its rules. I was somewhere else, someone else. The trees were ancient, their bark rough under my fingers, but the path beneath my feet was worn, as if countless travelers had passed this way. The medallion showed me this was 1743, a convergence point in what would become upstate New York, a place where time's fabric was thin, fraying, leaking echoes of other eras. I walked, the medallion's light illuminating my path, revealing glimpses of other times. A Revolutionary War camp, soldiers huddled around a fire. A Native American village, long vanished. A modern highway, cars blurring past. The convergence point was unstable, its threads tangling. The medallion urged me forward, to a clearing where a stone circle stood, its rocks etched with symbols like those on the medallion. I knelt, pressing the medallion to the central stone. The light flared, and I felt the point stabilize, the threads weaving back together, the echoes fading. The forest grew quiet, the air still, as if time itself had exhaled. I learned quickly that the medallion's partnership was not passive, communicated through impressions, images, feelings, instincts, guiding me to where I was needed. It didn't control me. It offered choices, trusting my judgment. I was its partner, not its servant, and it was mine, a symbiotic bond unlike the one it had shared with James, who had taken more than he gave. My grandmother's blood, her genetic quirk, allowed this clarity, this balance. I wondered if she'd known, if she'd sensed the medallion's potential when she chose to walk away. The medallion took me to other convergence points, each a lesson, each a challenge. In 12th century Kyoto, I stood in a temple garden, cherry blossoms falling like snow, the air thick with incense. The convergence point here was tied to a shrine, its wooden beams carved with the medallion's symbols. A monk watched me, his eyes knowing, as if he sensed my purpose. I repaired the rift, the medallion's light blending with the shrine's quiet energy, stabilizing time's flow. In 1880s London, I walked fog-choked streets, the convergence point hidden in a clockmaker's shop, its gears humming with unnatural rhythm. I adjusted the rift, the medallion guiding my hands, and felt the city's pulse steady. Each journey deepened my understanding. The medallion was not just a tool. It was a traveler, too, seeking to learn, to grow through its bearers. James had used it for power, bending time to his will, but I saw its deeper purpose, to mend, to balance, to preserve the delicate weave of reality. I saw the cost of imbalance in a 16th century Andean village, where a convergence point had ruptured, leaving villagers frozen in moments that looped endlessly, their faces etched with confusion. I repaired it, but the effort drained me, the medallion warning me of my limits. I was still human, still mortal, despite the bond. I began to see James's choices differently. His arrogance, his manipulations were born of centuries alone, the medallion's power amplifying his flaws. I wondered if I'd falter too, given time. But the medallion's trust steadied me, its faith in our partnership a reminder of my grandmother's hope that a better way was possible. In the dense jungles of the Congo, the medallion led me to a convergence point hidden within a collapsed ziggurat, its stone blocks covered in vines and moss. As I approached, animals fled, the forest holding its breath. Inside, the air was cool, damp, charged. I stepped carefully, deciphering symbols etched in ancient dialects, and when I placed the medallion into a carved basin, the rift revealed itself, a shimmer in the air, distorting reality. Repairing it sent shockwaves through the structure, but I emerged unscathed, the jungle sighing in relief. The medallion pulsed with a strange warmth afterward, almost gratitude. I began to sense its moods, its subtle guidance. Not control, but partnership. In 1920s Cairo, the convergence point was hidden beneath a marketplace, buried in catacombs once used by secret societies. Navigating the maze was harrowing. I could hear whispers echoing off sandstone, see flickers of movement in the dark. But the medallion brightened, cutting through illusion, helping me find the rift tucked within a burial chamber. As I sealed it, I felt something watching, something displeased. It wasn't the medallion. It was something older, darker, a force that opposed the medallion's purpose. I called it the Echo. It existed at the periphery, whispering to the desperate, promising power in exchange for corruption. I realized James hadn't been entirely at fault. The Echo had reached him too. It offered shortcuts, certainty, dominion. But each time I touched a convergence point, I understood that the right path was often the hardest. In the Arctic Circle, I encountered a rift that fractured the aurora itself. Light split, creating ghost images of explorers long dead. It took days to find the right frequency, the medallion humming a song only I could hear. When I finally sealed the breach, the light collapsed into a single, silent beam, as if the sky itself thanked me. But the echo grew louder. It taunted me in dreams, showed me visions of failure, of worlds consumed by imbalance. I resisted. By now, my bond with the medallion was nearly complete. I could feel time's ebb and flow, predict the appearance of convergence points. In a futuristic city floating above the ocean, I faced my most complex challenge. Technology had allowed humans to manipulate time artificially, creating unstable loops. The convergence point here pulsed erratically, and interference from machines made repair nearly impossible. I had to convince the city's engineers to shut down their systems temporarily. A risky move. They resisted. Time was their currency, their power, but I showed them the damage. I brought them to the edge of a loop, a boy reliving his mother's death again and again. That broke them. They allowed me access. With great effort, I stabilized the rift. The city dimmed for a moment, then rebooted with cleaner rhythms. Not perfect, but safer. I left them hopeful, but the medallion showed signs of wear. Cracks formed in its surface. Light flickered uncertainly. It had limits, too, and I knew now that James had learned this the hard way. His final journal entry, hidden in a 14th century French abbey, revealed his regret. He had tried to seal a rift without the medallion. It had consumed him. The echo had won that time. I grieved him, not the enemy he became, but the guardian he once was. My grandmother had known both sides of him. She had hoped I could be better. The medallion responded to that hope, aligning more closely with my will. I wasn't just repairing rifts now. I was preventing them, anticipating disruption, stopping it before it began. But the echo remained, and it grew bolder. In a dream, it took James's form and spoke. You think you're different. You think time can be tamed. But you're still mortal, still bound by fear. I woke drenched in sweat. The medallion was dim. I felt a convergence point nearing, closer than ever before. Home. The rift formed beneath my grandmother's house. The basement pulsed with energy, the walls trembling. I descended slowly, the medallion clutched in both hands. Shadows curled at the edges, familiar whispers swirling. I saw echoes of her. My grandmother as a young woman, facing James, both wielding medallions, both terrified. The rift was a scar between them, unresolved pain made manifest. I stepped into it. Time fractured. I relived moments from my life. My first discovery of the journal, my grandmother's final breath, my own childhood fears. The echo hissed, trying to twist these memories, to rewrite them. But I held fast. I called on everything I'd learned: Kyoto, London, Cairo, the Arctic, the Ocean City. The medallion shone again, brighter than ever. I reached into the rift, not to fight, but to reconcile. I saw James there, broken, fading. I offered him peace. The echo shrieked, but I did not let go. My love for my grandmother, my belief in healing, overpowered its hatred. And then stillness. The rift closed. The medallion crumbled into dust, its purpose complete. I was left in the quiet, surrounded by fading echoes. Time flowed again, undisturbed. I returned upstairs. The house was the same, but the weight of centuries had lifted. I buried the dust of the medallion in the garden, beneath her favorite rose bush. She had always said roses remembered. I think she was right. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I hear her laugh and feel the world hold its breath, balanced, whole. Because some names should never be spoken, but some stories must be told. Months or perhaps years passed in my journeys. Time was fluid now, its edges blurred. The medallion called me back to Millbrook, to the convergence point I'd left behind. I appeared in the town green, the oak trees unchanged, though the shops were different, the cars sleeker. It was 2030, 5 years after I'd left. The medallion showed me the point was stable but needed checking, like a wound that required occasional care. I walked to Pine Hill Road, the house standing as it always had, though the paint was fresher, the garden tidier. My mother answered the door, her hair grayer, her eyes widening. "Eleanor?" she whispered, pulling me into a hug. I told her a version of the truth, that I'd been traveling, processing grandmother's death, finding my path. The medallion's warmth urged discretion. My full story wasn't ready to be told. I visited Martin at the Historical Society. He was older, frilier, but his bow tie was still perfect. "You kept your promise," he said, relief in his voice. "The town's been quiet. No anomalies." I nodded, checking the convergence point with the medallion's guidance. It was strong, its threads intact. James, I learned, had stayed in Millbrook, living quietly, working at the library. I found him there, shelving books, his face lined but peaceful, a man in his late 30s now. "Eleanor," he said, smiling softly, "you've changed." So had he. The medallion showed me his heart, regretful, seeking redemption. I left them both, promising to return. Months, or perhaps years, passed in my journeys. Time was fluid now, its edges blurred. The medallion called me back to Millbrook, to the convergence point I'd left behind. I appeared in the town green, the oak trees unchanged, though the shops were different, the cars sleeker. It was 2030, 5 years after I'd left. The medallion showed me the point was stable but needed checking, like a wound that required occasional care. I walked to Pine Hill Road, the house standing as it always had, though the paint was fresher, the garden tidier. My mother answered the door, her hair grayer, her eyes widening. "Eleanor?" she whispered, pulling me into a hug. I told her a version of the truth, that I'd been traveling, processing grandmother's death, finding my path. The medallion's warmth urged discretion. My full story wasn't ready to be told. I visited Martin at the Historical Society. He was older, frilier, but his bow tie was still perfect. "You kept your promise," he said, relief in his voice. "The town's been quiet. No anomalies." I nodded, checking the convergence point with the medallion's guidance. It was strong, its threads intact. James, I learned, had stayed in Millbrook, living quietly, working at the library. I found him there, shelving books, his face lined but peaceful, a man in his late 30s now. "Eleanor," he said, smiling softly, "you've changed." So had he. The medallion showed me his heart, regretful, seeking redemption. I left them both, promising to return. The medallion and I continued our work, mending rifts in 4th century Rome, 19th century Senegal, a future city I couldn't name, its skyline alien yet familiar. Each journey taught me more about the medallion's origins, a fragment of something older than Earth, seeking connection, understanding. I began to train others, those with the rare quirk my grandmother passed to me, forming a network of travelers to maintain the world's thin places. I returned to Millbrook often, anchoring myself to my family, to the house on Pine Hill Road. My mother grew to accept my absences, though she never knew the full truth. One night, in a convergence point in ancient Mesopotamia, the medallion showed me a vision of my grandmother, young and smiling, her hand on my shoulder. "You found the better way," she said, her voice an echo across time. I carried her hope, her courage, as I wove my own legacy. A traveler, a healer, partnered with an ancient will, mending time's fragile threads, forever tied to the house on Pine Hill Road, to the family that shaped me, to the choice that set me free.